the configuration of modern Western society can basically be summed up in a single word: democracy. This word has characterized our civilization for the last few centuries or so. And of course, we never hear the end of it, with every Western politician making sure to remind us we are in a democracy every 5 seconds, and calling everything that is a threat to us a threat to democracy. Our enemies are evil because they hate democracy. Our friends are good because they love democracy. Democracy is the thing that is supposed to motivate us to work to support this society. And if we ever go into conflict, they tell us we are fighting to defend democracy. We're not defending our people, our legacy, our traditions, truth, justice, no. We're defending democracy. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that democracy is the most important thing to the elite class. So the question must be asked, what is actually so important about democracy? Now, we all know the definition of democracy, at least on paper. It is power of the people. The people of a democratic nation can decide their own future by making all the political decisions. And then bundled together with this is the idea of freedom, because if the people can make their own decisions, that must mean they are free, right? So, this has always been contrasted with tyranny, or more specifically monarchy, which is what modern democracy rose out of in the first place. Like, we had monarchy, but it was terrible because everyone was oppressed by this tyrant dictator who decided everything. But now, we have democracy, and we're all free, and everything is great. You wouldn't want to lose our democracy, would you? We would become a dictatorship. And we're made to see these as polar opposites, essentially. The truth is, everything we have been told about democracy is a lie. It has nothing to do with people power, and it has nothing to do with freedom. It is an evil system, and in my opinion, is the #1 problem in modern society. There's no point even talking about any other issues until we can recognise how our society is actually working and why it's so bad. If you want to make big changes in society, but you still believe in democracy, you're trapped. You're stuck. So I'm going to try in this video to comprehensively destroy democracy with logic and probably not very many facts, to be honest. I'm more of a logic guy, not really a facts guy. But I think I've got some pretty solid arguments here, so bear with me. So, first of all, let's break this down. I'm going to start with the idea that democracy is about freedom. My definition of freedom is that oneself is one's highest authority. You can do whatever you want to do, and nobody can make you do anything you don't want to do. This is the freedom that every individual has in the state of nature. The problem with the state of nature is that since everyone is free, other people are free to attack you, and the only way you can get them to stop is to fight them off. So it's not going to be a very peaceful life, and also it's probably going to be quite boring since you're just an individual. So you're not going to be able to do much on your own compared to what people can achieve in a group. So what always ends up happening is that people form communities in order to protect themselves. There needs to be rules that make sure everyone is safe, and there needs to be someone who makes sure everyone follows the rules. And this rule enforcer needs to have authority, by definition. Because if they're on the same level as everyone else, nobody has any reason to listen to them, instead of just doing whatever they want. The moment You enter into this kind of arrangement, you're not free anymore. That's it. You can't just do whatever you want if the rules say you can't, and you have to do things you don't want to do if the rules say you have to. This is the sacrifice people have to make in order to be protected from the outside. You can call any system that offers this protection an enforcement group. Democracy, monarchy, and mafia are all examples of an enforcement group. I actually think there are very few differences between these three things. A mafia boss, a king, a politician are all going to tell you the same thing. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to make sure you have a good community. But you're going to have to listen to me. Step out of line and you will be punished. Now, of course, you will still be free to do some things. And that's where we get into the two ideas of freedom that democracy talks about. Free to and free from. Free to are all the things the state will not punish you for doing. Free from is what I was just talking about, the things the state will protect you from. Both these concepts are free in name only. They have nothing to do with freedom. Free to and freedom are two different things. For example, a hamster in a cage is free to do anything it wants inside that cage, but it doesn't have freedom. Anything you are free to do is not because you have retained the right, but because you have been granted the right. If a higher authority decides what you are free to do, that means the only things you are allowed to do are what they approve of, and that could be as many things or as few things as the authority allows. And while you may be free from outsiders inside a democratic state, you will never be free from the state itself. If the state wants to harm you or take away your rights, it can, and its power to do so only grows the more things it frees you from. So free from is simply a paradox. A funny way of saying how arbitrary freedom is in a democracy is if you compare American democracy to European democracy. They both call themselves democracies, but they each focus on a different part of the freedom idea. America focuses on freedom to, whereas Europe focuses on freedom from. What really opened my eyes about this is when I was talking to a European a while ago, and we got onto the topic of free speech in America. Now, if you know Europeans, they have this insane superiority complex. They have everything figured out, they solve the life, and everyone would be better off if they just listened to them. So, obviously, they hated America's free speech policy. But the reason they gave was, it wasn't true freedom. Now, why would they say that? Because they only think of freedom in terms of freedom from. It doesn't matter how little you are free to do, so long as the government keeps you free from all that mean hate speech. At least in America, you've got a lot of people correctly saying that the smaller government is, the more freedom you have. But that's still not a good look for democracy or any other enforcement group. Europe doesn't give a fuck about that. They just want the government to do everything. What they don't realise is that freedom cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. When you sacrifice your freedom for safety, that freedom doesn't just vanish. It gets given to the state. The choice being made here is not, would you rather 1 million people, each with one freedom, or 1 million people with no freedoms? It's 1 million people with one freedom, or one person with 1 million freedoms. Not so utopian when you put it like that, is it? But of course, they claim that modern democracy gets around this through checks and balances, so no one person can have all the freedom. The thing is, that a check and balance system, where freedom is spread equally, would look like this. How it actually works is like this. Freedom is spread out among the highest levels of society. All these institutions are still made up of elites, leaving the common person no more free than they were before. And this is the part where democracy defenders will come in and say, none of that applies to democracy. It might apply to the other enforcement groups, but not democracy. Because, and that brings me to the next point, the people have the power. This is definitely the more important claim to deal with, since this is what democracy is actually about. I mean, it's literally the meaning of the word. Of course, if the people are making their own decisions, they can't be oppressed by anyone. You can't oppress yourself. If you don't like something, you can just change it, right? Well, let's see how much power the people really have here. Let's go through this. Starting from the beginning. What is the most basic idea of democracy? People discussing with each other and coming up with the best solution through comparing ideas. This is why democracy, when it was first tried, was limited to certain people who were determined to be the most intelligent and wise, who would be able to figure out the objectively correct course of action. So straight away, first issue, there is almost never an objectively correct course of action. And if there was, politics would be an actual science and not something people would need to constantly debate over. That's the second issue. Because there is no objective answer as to how society should be run, debates can go on forever. We can see this in modern society. The same debates have been happening for over 100 years. How is anything supposed to get done if nobody is able to prove anyone else objectively wrong? When is a debate over? You can end it by installing a tyrant and getting rid of democracy. Otherwise, there's only one solution. And that is voting. This is what really defines democracy as we know it. If everything gets put to a vote, stuff can get done. And since everyone has one vote, everyone has the exact same power as before, right? Well, no. This is actually where the idea of democracy completely falls apart. All a vote does is take away the freedom of the minority and give it to the majority. There is no way to solve this. If you lose a vote, your vote meant nothing and your opinion meant nothing. You have no power. The only way this doesn't completely destroy society is when whatever you're voting over is not a big deal. Because all the voters already agree on the important things. For example, it doesn't really matter who wins this vote. Everyone already agrees that there should be a National Cat Day. If one side doesn't get the date they want, they can just shrug and move on, because at the end of it all, everyone still wins. They all get a National Cat Day. But what about this vote? This is much more serious. Here, we can't really see any fundamental values that both sides might share. This is a fundamental question. Cats or no cats? Whichever side wins is going to have a big effect on what kind of society this is. And whoever loses is not going to be happy. Why? Because voting doesn't solve problems. Just because 10% more people voted one way, why would that convince anyone in the minority to change their mind? How does it prove them wrong? It doesn't. Voting is a brute force method of getting things done. It goes completely against the original idea of discussion and reason as a way to make decisions. You don't need to discuss or use reason to vote, so the result of the vote will not be the result of discussion and reasoning. If people don't agree, they don't have to waste time talking about it. They can just vote and get it over with. And in modern society, that's exactly what most people do. And then what happens? People keep voting over the same problems because they never get solved. People get divided into warring tribes based on their beliefs. And if a tribe gets powerless and angry enough, they might even try destroying society altogether to get their power back. So not only does democracy fail at solving problems, it creates even more. Now, liberalism has attempted to solve all these issues through a modern version of democracy. Everything I've been saying so far has been about direct democracy. Of course, the system we live under today is a representative democracy. Instead of directly voting on policy, here, the people vote for a representative who will determine policy in their place. With each area of a nation having its own representative, the idea is that the representative acts as a mediator between all the different factions in that area, acting in the best interests of them all as a collective. As everyone has a representative, everyone is represented, and nobody loses their democratic power. However, just like with voting, while this seems like a solution at first, all it does is double down on the flaws of democracy, while making it even worse. Yes, somehow it can still get worse. So, straight away, we can see that under this new system, the common voter does not get the last word, like in direct democracy. Representatives do, meaning their word means more than everyone else's. They have the authority, they have the power. The people have given that power, that freedom, to them. Representative democracy is not a system where the people have power. It is a system where some people have power. That is also true for every other political system in existence. So what is so special about democracy? I'll get to that later. Now, someone might say, but representatives don't have power, that's the whole point. They have to carry out the will of the people. And indeed, what do these representatives call themselves? They call themselves public servants. The government serves the people, because we're in a democracy where the people have power, so the people are actually at the top of the hierarchy. Of course, this is complete bullshit, but it's more or less par for the course as an inversion of the truth in a society defined by rational and moral inversion. Can the people tell a representative what to do? No. Can the people force a representative to step down? No. Therefore, the people have no power over their representatives. It's that simple. Again, someone may say, there are democratic ways you can influence your representative. You can write to them, you can protest, and you can vote them out. Therefore, the people have power? Not at all. Many people intuitively understand that these methods are useless. The reason why is because they are empty threats. Why does a representative have to read your letter? What are you going to do if they don't? Why does a representative have to pay attention to your protest? What are you going to do if they don't? Why would replacing one representative with another make sure the new one is going to do what you want? What are you going to do if they don't? You won't do shit. People have been made to believe by our rulers that democracy is about peace. Peaceful methods of making your voice heard are democratic, but violent ones aren't. Most people want to be good and want to live in peaceful societies, so they'll go along with this, making empty threats and having no power and being a good Samaritan. There are other ways of showing your disapproval, the two main ones being riots and strikes. But any time an organic riot or an organic strike happens, the media and the politicians immediately come out and say, This is undemocratic. This goes against everything our democracy stands for. The people aren't supposed to be able to back up their threats. That's not democracy. That alone tells you everything about what the elites actually consider democracy to be. I found it particularly funny when the American media was saying all this about January 6th. Not an organic event, but nevertheless. This is not how we do things in America. I remember one of them literally said that. The sheer irony of that statement when their country was literally founded by revolution is insane. The American media would have probably called the Boston Tea Party undemocratic. And this highlights something that has clearly been completely forgotten about how the Founding Fathers viewed democracy. Just look at the US Constitution. Why is the right to bear arms the Second Amendment? The second most important thing, right after free speech. The right to due process in law is the Fifth Amendment by comparison. So what is so essential about the Second Amendment? Well, it's actually the missing piece in all of this. The citizenry having guns is the check and balance system between them and their rulers. Representatives cannot ignore the people if the people can threaten them with an armed insurrection at any time if they believe they are being oppressed. Without this bargaining chip, the people have absolutely no power at all. The thing is, while the Second Amendment does make representative democracy make more sense, it still doesn't make it work. Well, why not? What if all the representatives were committed to carrying out the will of the people? Why wouldn't that work? Well, what is it that the representatives are actually doing? In order to prevent the division and powerlessness caused by a vote in direct democracy, they gather with the other representatives and vote. It's just direct democracy with an extra step. Nothing has changed. The only differences with a representative are all the additional holes that have opened up in the system, making it more corruptible and less representative than it was before. Let's go over how useless representatives are at representing the people. First off, a representative cannot represent everyone. This is just logistically impossible. The only way you could try to do this is through compromise. If you've got a faction who wants 3 cats per household and a faction who wants 1 cat per household, well, you can compromise with the 2 cat per household limit. That seems simple enough. Now, what happens when you also have a faction who wants no limit on cats per household at all? This is how it usually is with most issues. 2 completely opposite views with no chance of reconciliation. The representative, as an individual, has to take a side. Cat limit or no cat limit. And because they will be making decisions like this all the time, some people are going to get represented more than others. And we're back where we started. Representatives are also under no obligation to represent anyone. If they really try to compromise, what they will end up doing is coming up with policies that no individual they are representing ever asked for. They can also simply do absolutely anything they want on the basis that there is probably someone they are representing who would agree with it. I mean, there probably is. For pretty much every belief, you're going to be able to find someone who believes it. In either case, what they have is plausible deniability. That's the nature of quote-unquote serving 1 million people. It's just not possible. So no one can really even complain that they're not doing it. Then there is the fact that the representative's nature as an individual makes them vulnerable to coercion in a way that the 1 million people they are representing are not. You can't bribe 1 million people, nor can you threaten 1 million people. But you can do both those things to a representative. which makes it very easy for powerful outside entities to take control of these representatives. So they can actually end up representing anyone with enough money or influence instead of the people who elected them. And this happens all the time. I mean, they don't even need to hide it. Lobbying is legal in the entire Western world, and they even describe it as an essential component of democracy. If that doesn't tell you how much of a joke this all is, nothing will. Representatives are also the final nail in the coffin for the idea of rational debate as a feature of democracy. In the same way that any other profession outsources a certain skill set to certain people, when politics becomes a job, political knowledge and expertise gets outsourced to the politicians, to the point where the average person never has to think about politics at all. Representatives facilitate ignorance, and an ignorant population can be manipulated into voting for anything the politician wants, so long as he tells them it's for their own good. There's not even any benefit to being an informed voter, since at the end of the day, you have to rely on the exact same thing as the uninformed voter. Trust. You have to trust that the person you're voting for isn't lying to you. And that's the other thing. Electoral systems do not favour rational thinkers. An election is not a debate. It is a popularity contest. Therefore, what matters most is popularity. The representative who gets elected is the one who is the most popular, not the one with the best ideas. How do politicians get popular? By being charismatic and telling people what they want to hear. Forget about the truth. The people with the best chance of success here are the most convincing liars. This is because there are no consequences for lying in a democracy. Once you're elected, you can do whatever you want, and nobody who voted for you can say anything about it. The other main way of gaining popularity is through resources. The more money you have, the more you will be able to promote yourself, so the more people will vote for you. And that's why politics is completely dominated by the elite class, who have the most resources to put into their campaigns. This is where we can finally see who benefits from democracy. It's not the common citizen. It's their elite rulers, who are the ones with all of the power. Even if there wasn't already an elite class, one would eventually form after people got elected to these elite government positions. Now we can answer the question of why democracy is so important to the elites. It's because democracy is the best system in the world for the elites. Its purpose is to ensure that the elite class remains in power forever, and so far it has succeeded everywhere it has been tried. But if democracy is not about freedom, and not about power of the people, what is the actual definition of democracy? The way I see it, this is it. Democracy is the illusion that the people have power. It emerged not as an alternative to, but as an evolution of monarchy. The problem with monarchy for the elites is that the monarch was not powerful enough. The age of kings was filled with insurrection, war, and betrayal, and yet the average government today has far more control over people's lives than kings ever did, and the people do nothing. All thanks to a single principle, that there is no greater slave than the servant who believes himself to be the master. There are three main improvements that democracy has compared to monarchy. The first is the division of kings. With monarchy, the king is in charge of everything, so if society is failing, The people know who to blame, and they know what to do about it. There is no peaceful way to remove a monarch. But in a democracy, there is. The political party in power is the modern king, and democracy has an inbuilt system. Elections, where if the people don't like the king, they can peacefully replace him with a new king. The deception is that the king is not the ruling party. The king is the entire state apparatus, puppeteering the political parties to create the illusion of conflict between them, and the illusion of change when one replaces the other. The commoners will not revolt if they believe they made a difference by replacing the king, even when they have changed nothing. And they will never see their rulers as tyrants due to how seemingly easy it is to get rid of them, and how much opposition they seem to face from the other parties, when in reality, the king is completely invincible. The second improvement is the redirection of responsibility. If the people believe that they have the power, then they will blame themselves if society fails, rather than blaming the people who actually made the decisions that ruin society. This is a demoralizing force that redirects one's anger inward rather than outward, where it would be dangerous to the elites. Obviously, this would never happen in a monarchy. While not everyone will feel this way because not everyone's vote matters, enough people will to the point where organising a revolution becomes unthinkable. After all, you making a mistake is no excuse to tear everything down and start over. There is always a chance for you to make things right with the next election, which plays into the division of kings. For anyone not yet caught in the trap of democracy by the first two improvements, there is the third and arguably most important improvement: perpetual civil war. The one thing democracy was always effective at was creating conflict, and when used as a weapon against the people, this is one of its greatest strengths. Using political parties, the populace is split into various tribes with radically different ideologies. They are then encouraged to blame the opposing tribes for all the problems in society. At the same time, they each support one of the king's many faces, and in so doing, everyone ends up supporting the king without even knowing it. No matter how much the elites oppress the people, so long as the people see their neighbour as their enemy, they will only ever react by fighting among themselves. Not only that, but for the sake of winning the war against their fellow citizens, the people will even beg for more oppression, never thinking that it will be used against them as well. This is why the peace and unity that democracy promises can never happen. Peace cannot be built on the foundations of conflict, and a whole cannot be united through division. In order for a society to succeed, its people must see themselves as one unit, with one set of goals, one set of values, and one set of beliefs. When one knows where they are going, it is easy to figure out how to get there. When one understands what is important, no debate is necessary to make tough decisions. That is true strength. We must be our own king. We must not blame ourselves for the crimes of others, and we must not blame others for the crimes of our rulers. They need democracy, but we don't, and until people realise that, nothing will change. But as strong as their illusion may be, I still have hope. You see, they made one big mistake in all this. They made people care about freedom. They made people care about having the power to control their own destiny. We still have that power. That is the truth that they fear the most. If people still believe that we should aspire to goodness, justice, and making the world a better place, whatever that may entail, it is never over. We all have a vote, but that vote is far more than a piece of paper in a box. Perhaps to them, this is the real definition of democracy.